It started with a feeling. Emily had moved into her new apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood just 2 weeks ago, eager for a fresh start after a messy breakup. The building was old but charming, cracked brick walls, ivy creeping up the sides, and a row of identical units facing a shared courtyard. Her neighbor across the way, Mr. Hargrove, was a wiry man in his late 60s with a pinched face and a habit of staring too long when they passed in the hall. He'd wave, but his eyes never seemed to blink, locked on her like a predator sizing up prey. She brushed it off as eccentricity. Old people could be odd, she told herself. The first night she noticed something strange was a Tuesday. She was unpacking boxes in her living room, the curtains wide open to let in the cool autumn breeze. The courtyard outside was empty, bathed in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. As she bent to tape up a box, a prickling sensation crawled up her spine, like someone was watching her. She straightened up and glanced out the window. There, in the window directly across from hers, stood Mr. Hargrove. He was motionless, his silhouette framed by the yellow light of his apartment, staring straight at her. No wave, no smile, just those unblinking eyes boring into her soul. Emily froze, her heart thudding in her chest. How long had he been there? She waved awkwardly, hoping to break the tension, but he didn't move. Not a twitch. Just that relentless gaze. After what felt like an eternity, she yanked the curtains shut, her hands trembling. She told herself it was nothing, he was probably just spaced out, lost in thought. But when she peeked through a crack in the fabric 10 minutes later, he was still there, unchanged, like a statue carved from shadow. The next morning, she saw him in the courtyard watering a pitiful patch of weeds. She forced a smile and called out, "Nice day, huh?" He turned slowly, his head tilting at an odd angle, and rasped, "You shouldn't leave your windows open at night. Things get in." His voice was gravelly, like he hadn't spoken in years, and his eyes lingered on her a beat too long before he shuffled back inside. Emily laughed it off to her coworker later, but the unease gnawed at her. That night she double-checked the locks and kept the curtains closed. But sleep didn't come easy. Around 2 a.m., she jolted awake to a faint tapping sound, rhythmic, insistent, like fingernails on glass. It was coming from the living room. Her stomach dropped. She lived on the second floor. No one could reach her window without a ladder. Holding her breath, she crept out of bed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The tapping grew louder as she approached the living room, a steady tap-tap-tap that echoed in the silence. She reached the window and hesitated, her hand hovering over the curtain. Part of her screamed to call the police, but another part needed to know. With a shaky breath, she pulled the curtain aside, just an inch. The courtyard was dark, the street lamp out. But there, pressed against her windowpane, was a pale, wrinkled hand, its fingers splayed and tapping, tapping, tapping. She stumbled back, a scream catching in her throat. The hand didn't belong to anyone she could see, no body, no face, just a disembodied limb suspended in the night. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The tapping stopped, leaving only the sound of her ragged breathing. When she worked up the courage to look again, the window was empty. But across the courtyard, Mr. Hargrove's light was on, and his silhouette stood motionless in the window once more, staring right at her. Emily barely slept after the hand at the window. She spent the rest of the night curled up on her couch, lights blazing, jumping at every creak of the old building. By morning, exhaustion outweighed fear, and she convinced herself it was a nightmare, her mind playing tricks after a stressful move. But the image of those pale, tapping fingers lingered, and Mr. Hargrove's staring silhouette burned in her memory. She decided to confront him. If he was messing with her, she'd make it clear she wasn't some timid pushover. She knocked on his door that afternoon, her pulse racing. The hallway was dim, the air thick with the musty scent of mildew. No answer. She knocked again, harder, and heard a faint shuffle inside, like slippers dragging across wood. "Mr. Hargrove? It's Emily, from across the way. Can we talk?" Silence stretched, then a low rasp slithered through the door. "Not now. Busy." His voice sounded closer than it should have, like he was pressed right against the wood. She stepped back, goosebumps prickling her arms, and muttered a quick, "Okay, later then," before retreating. That night the tapping didn't return, but something worse took its place. Around midnight, as Emily lay in bed scrolling her phone to calm her nerves, she heard it, a whisper. Faint, barely audible, like a breeze carrying words she couldn't quite catch. She muted her phone and held her breath. The sound was coming from the wall, the one separating her apartment from Mr. Hargrove's. She pressed her ear against it, the plaster cold against her skin, and the whispers sharpened into fragments. "Sees you, always, watching." The voice was his, unmistakable, that same gravelly rasp. Her stomach lurched. Was he talking to himself? To her? She banged on the wall, shouting, "Stop it! I can hear you!" The whispers cut off abruptly, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed against her eardrums. Then, a single, deliberate thump answered her, a fist against the wall, hard enough to rattle her picture frames. She stumbled back, heart hammering, and grabbed her phone to call the landlord. But before she could dial, the whispers started again, louder, overlapping, a chorus of his voice. "Knows where you sleep, knows." Terrified, she fled to the living room, slamming her bedroom door shut. The whispers followed, seeping through the walls, circling her like a swarm of insects. She fumbled with her keys, ready to bolt to her car, when she glanced out the window, and froze. Mr. Hargrove stood in the courtyard below, staring up at her. But something was wrong. His head was tilted too far back, his neck bent at an impossible angle, and his mouth hung open, unnaturally wide, as if something inside him was forcing it apart. The whispers stopped, and in the stillness she swore she saw his lips move, mouthing her name. Then the street lamp flickered, and he was gone. No shuffle, no retreat, just vanished. Emily sank to the floor, sobbing, clutching her phone. She didn't dare look at his window. She didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her, even now. When Jake and his wife, Sarah, bought the fixer-upper next to the old Victorian house, they thought they'd scored a steal. The neighborhood was quiet, the price was right, and the looming, dilapidated mansion next door added a Gothic charm they both adored. The realtor warned them the place had been empty for years. Its last owner, a recluse named Mrs. Carter, died there decades ago, and no one wanted it since. Jake joked it'd make a great haunted house for Halloween. Sarah rolled her eyes, but she felt a chill every time she looked at its sagging porch and blacked-out windows. The first oddity came the day they moved in. Jake was hauling boxes into the garage when he heard it, a low, rhythmic sound, like air being sucked in and pushed out. It was faint, almost lost under the chirping of birds, but it seemed to come from the Victorian next door. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and listened. In, out, like breathing, deep and deliberate. He squinted at the house, its curtains still, no sign of life. A breeze, he figured, old houses creak and groan. He shrugged it off and went back to work. That night, Sarah woke him at 3 a.m., her voice trembling. "Do you hear that?" Jake rubbed his eyes and listened. There it was again, the breathing, louder now, seeping through their bedroom wall. In, out. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and alive. "It's that damn house," Sarah whispered, clutching the blanket. Jake got up, peering through their window at the Victorian. Its silhouette loomed against the moonlit sky, windows dark as empty sockets. But the sound was undeniable, rising and falling, a living thing wrapped in rotting wood. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, ignoring Sarah's protests. The night was still, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. The breathing grew louder as he approached the fence separating their yards, each inhale rattling the overgrown weeds. He shone the light across the Victorian's facade, peeling paint, broken shutters, a front door hanging ajar. Nothing moved. Yet the sound filled his chest, vibrating in his bones. He took a step closer, his beam catching something in the upstairs window, a flicker, like a shadow shifting out of sight. Then the breathing stopped. Silence crashed down, so sudden it left his ears ringing. He stood there, frozen, waiting for it to start again. It didn't. Instead, a single light flared to life in the downstairs window, a sickly yellow glow, flickering like a dying bulb. No one had lived there in years. No one should have been inside. Jake's mouth went dry. He backed away, the flashlight trembling in his hand, and ran back to the house, locking the door behind him. Sarah was waiting, pale as a ghost. "What was it?" she asked. He didn't answer. He couldn't. But as they lay in bed, wide awake, the breathing started again, closer now, right outside their wall. Jake and Sarah barely spoke the next morning. The breathing had faded with the sunrise, leaving an uneasy quiet in its wake. Over coffee, Sarah insisted it was just the wind, or maybe pipes in the old Victorian next door. Jake nodded, but he couldn't shake the image of that yellow light flickering on, or the shadow he swore he'd seen upstairs. He decided to investigate, if only to prove to himself it was nothing supernatural. Sarah begged him not to go near the place, but he grabbed a crowbar from the garage and headed out, promising he'd just peek through the windows. The Victorian loomed larger in daylight, its warped boards and shattered glass giving it the look of a decaying skull. The front door still hung ajar, swaying slightly despite the still air. Jake approached cautiously, the crowbar heavy in his hand. The breathing was gone, replaced by a faint hum, like distant machinery, or a hive of insects. He peered through a cracked window into what might have been a parlor. Dust coated everything, a sagging couch, a broken chandelier, a mirror smeared with grime. Nothing moved. Yet the hum grew louder, buzzing in his ears, making his teeth ache. He circled to the back, where the yard was a tangle of thorns and rusted junk. A basement window caught his eye, boarded up, but one plank was loose. He pried it free with the crowbar, revealing a black void beneath the house. The hum poured out, thick and alive, accompanied by a stale, earthy smell. He leaned closer, squinting into the dark, when something echoed back, a voice, faint and garbled, mimicking his own breathing. In, out. It wasn't the house this time. It was him, his own rhythm thrown back at him, distorted and wrong. Jake stumbled back, heart pounding. The echo shifted, twisting into words. "Come inside!" His skin crawled. He swung the crowbar at the air, as if he could strike the sound itself, and bolted back to the fence. But as he climbed over, a sharp crack split the silence, the basement window shattering outward, glass spraying across the yard. He didn't look back. He ran straight into the house, slamming the door, and found Sarah staring at him, wide-eyed. "What happened?" she demanded. Before he could answer, the breathing started again, louder, faster, vibrating through the walls of their house now, not the Victorian. That night, they barricaded the bedroom door with a dresser, huddling together as the sound pulsed around them. It wasn't just breathing anymore, there were footsteps, heavy and deliberate, pacing the hallway outside. Thump, thump, thump. Sarah whimpered, clutching Jake's arm. He grabbed his phone to call 911, but the screen flickered then died, despite a full battery. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then, a new sound, a low, wet chuckle, like air bubbling through mud. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Sarah whispered. "It followed you." Jake didn't argue. He knew she was right. Whatever was in that house had latched onto him, and now it was here, pressing against the door, waiting. The bedroom door didn't hold. At 3:17 a.m., Jake and Sarah woke to a splintering crash, the dresser toppling as the door buckled inward. The breathing flooded the room, a rasping, wet roar that drowned out Sarah's screams. Jake grabbed the crowbar he'd left by the bed, swinging wildly at the dark as something surged inside. It wasn't a person, not fully. A shape loomed tall and hunched, its edges blurring like smoke. Its face was a hollow pit where eyes should have been, and its mouth gaped, exhaling that awful in, out, right in their faces. Sarah bolted for the window, fumbling with the latch, while Jake lunged at the thing. The crowbar passed through it, clanging against the floor as if it were mist, but the impact sent a jolt up his arm, cold, electric, alive. The figure shuddered, its chuckle bubbling up again, and the room tilted. Furniture slid toward the walls, pictures crashing down, as if the house itself was inhaling, pulling everything inward. Sarah screamed Jake's name as the window shattered outward, glass raining into the night. She climbed out, cutting her hands on the shards, and Jake followed, tumbling onto the lawn. They ran to the car, the Victorian looming behind them, its yellow light pulsing like a heartbeat. But as Jake turned the key, the engine sputtered and died. The breathing was everywhere now, inside the car, vibrating the seats, fogging the windows with each exhale. Sarah clawed at the door, sobbing, when she froze. "Look!" she whispered, pointing back at their house. The thing stood in their bedroom window, its hollow face pressed against the glass, watching them. Then the Victorian's front door creaked open, and another shape emerged, identical, hollow, exhaling in sync. Jake floored the gas again, and this time the car roared to life. They sped away, abandoning everything, clothes, furniture, their new life. They didn't stop until dawn, checking into a motel 2 towns over. The breathing stopped, but the nightmares didn't. Weeks later, a neighbor from their old street texted Jake a photo, their house, now abandoned, its windows blacked out, and the Victorian next door, silent, still, its door ajar. The caption read, "Heard you left in a hurry. What's with the breathing?" Jake didn't reply. He couldn't. Because every night, in the motel, he woke to that same in, out, faint, but growing closer. Lila thought her new neighbors were just shy. She'd moved into the duplex on Elm Street, a quaint, split house with a shared wall, hoping for a peaceful retreat after a chaotic year. The other half was occupied by a middle-aged couple, the Graysons, who kept to themselves. She'd seen them once, unloading groceries, a gaunt man with sunken cheeks and a woman with stringy hair, both moving slowly, heads down. They didn't wave back when she greeted them, just shuffled inside without a word. Odd, but not alarming. The first sign of trouble came a week later. Lila was watering her plants on the porch when she noticed their blinds, always shut, twitch. A sliver of shadow moved behind them, too tall to be either Grayson she'd seen. She squinted, curious, but the blinds snapped shut. That night, as she cooked dinner, she heard it, a soft scrape, like something dragging across the floor, coming through the shared wall. It lasted a minute, then stopped. She tapped the wall lightly, half joking. "Keep it down over there!" No response, just silence. The next morning, she found footprints in her backyard, bare, muddy, too large for her own feet, leading from the Graysons' side of the duplex to her back door. The door was locked, untouched, but the prints stopped abruptly, as if whoever made them had vanished mid-step. Uneasy, she called the landlord, who grumbled that the Graysons were quiet folks, no trouble. Still, she installed a cheap security camera by the door, its grainy feed linked to her phone. That night, the scraping returned, louder, rhythmic, like nails clawing wood. Lila checked the camera feed, nothing but her empty porch. She pressed her ear to the wall, holding her breath. The sound shifted, a low murmur, voices overlapping, too muffled to make out. Then a single word broke through, clear as a bell. "Lila." Her blood ran cold. She hadn't told them her name. She stumbled back, grabbing a kitchen knife, when her phone buzzed, the camera alert. The feed showed her back door, bathed in moonlight. Standing there, motionless, were 2 figures, tall, impossibly thin, their heads cocked at odd angles. They weren't the Graysons. Their faces were blurred, like the camera couldn't focus, but their shadows stretched across the porch, sharp and black. They didn't move, didn't knock, just stood there, staring at the lens. Lila's hands shook as she dialed 911, whispering her address. But when the operator asked for details, the feed flickered, and the figures were gone. The scraping stopped. The wall went silent. When the police arrived, they found nothing, no footprints, no sign of the Graysons next door. Their unit was dark, the car gone. "Probably out," an officer said. But Lila knew better. She'd seen their blinds twitch again as the cops left, and this time, 3 shadows moved behind them,